Hassan, I would agree about the homework, but I'm even more focused on the information that you failed to provide during the course of our year-long investigation and the refusal to be more forthcoming about, for example, the cost of transporting checked bags. I just want to make clear on the line of questioning that Senator Hassan was just pursuing, she was focusing on Spirit and Frontier, but the fact is American told us that they require name, gender, date of birth, state and country of residence, email address, and phone number before any consumer can see seat fee prices. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Johnson?
That's correct, Senator.
And United requires name, gender, and date of birth, correct, Mr. Nocella? That's what United told us.
I believe that's correct.
Spirit, according to what we were told, requires name, gender, date of birth, street address, state and country of residence, zip code, email address, and phone number. Delta requires none of this information, which tells me none of this information is really necessary except for some other purpose. If Delta doesn't need it, the other airlines shouldn't need it either unless they're using it for some purpose unrelated to charging fee prices. What do you say to that point, Mr. Johnson?
Senator, the information that we collect is a combination of information that's required, that we are required to collect by law, by the government, the government's request.
But you collect it before anyone can even see what the prices are going to be, before they even know whether they're interested in making the purchase. You want this information from them. Why?
Correct. Correct, Senator. Well, at some point in time during the booking process, we're going to need to collect that information so that we can give it to the government.
If they're a customer, but they haven't made a decision even whether they're interested in your airline.
Exactly. So we have placed the request for the information at the point in the booking path just before seat selection, because some of our
Let me just ask you: will you commit to stop collecting this information,
Senator,
as Delta apparently does not do?
Senator, I'm required by law to collect the information.
You're saying Delta is breaking the law?
You'd have to ask Mr. Carter that question.
Well, no, I don't have to ask him that question because he's not collecting that information.
Okay,
Well,
Senator,
Mr. Carter, are you breaking the law by not requiring this information?
Senator, of course not.
Mr. Nocella, will you commit to stop collecting this information?
Just like my colleague on the far side, I do think the information is required to complete the booking process.
You say you're required by law to collect it.
I'm not saying it's required to complete the booking process.
You know, the danger here is that you're collecting this information without a need for it, obviously for some other purpose, and we all know what that other purpose is. So you can market to them or monetize that information in some other way. Information and data are the coin of the realm in our modern marketing and technology society. And collecting this information is potentially profoundly dangerous if there's no real need for it. Let me
Senator,
just, for the record.
Senator, if I could,
Yes,
I didn't
Mr.
get
Johnson.
a chance to answer your question. We collect the information, and we have thought about collecting it, designing our booking process in a way that where it's most convenient time for the customer to put the information in. And as you said, there are circumstances when the customers don't buy at all and don't want to put the booking information. Ours, we collect the booking information at the point we do because it determines the cost of the seat if the passenger chooses to select a preferred seat. And some of our best customers are entitled to discounts, and the only way we can apply those discounts is to know who they are. That's the only that's the only thing we use the information for with respect to booking.
But you don't need it at that point before someone has made a decision even to inquire about seat price.
Senator, if we didn't get it at that point, we wouldn't be able to offer the discounts to some of our customers that they're entitled to with respect to seat purchases.
Well, apparently Delta is able to do it without this information. And the information may be required by law at some point, but not then. And that's the point of the questioning. Let me just point out for the record on the family seating rule. During the comment period, you were represented by the industry association, Airlines for America, which essentially was, I would say, equivocal. It called the rule a possible, quote, Trojan horse. Spirit, I understand, opposed the rule. United said that the family seating rule was, quote, needless overreach. So I would suggest respectfully that you are being dragged, kicking, if not screaming, into compliance with this basic standard, and I hope this rule will be implemented and issued, as I've mentioned, as quickly as possible. Mr. Klein, I think you've raised the elephant in the room, and Senator Marshall was asking about it to some extent, which is the lack of competition or the barriers to entry and to competition that exists right now. And I'm just going to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the problems that Spirit has faced in the access to hubs and other kinds of obstacles that you've encountered in trying to compete more fully against some of the legacy airlines.
Certainly, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question and the ability to talk on this topic. So for a very long time, we've been dealing with the lack of access to certain airports, or when we do get some access, it is limited, and frequently we will be given gates, but they're maybe on far ends of the airport, which make it very difficult for us to provide a good guest experience, makes it very difficult for us to be able to operate efficiently and effectively. It raises our costs, which then, of course, makes it harder for us to be profitable. And without being profitable, we certainly can't grow. As it's very public right now, some of the dealings that we have by filing for Chapter 11 reorganization right now, and we're in this process today. One of the things that occurred as we came out of COVID was there is sort of a manufactured pilot shortage of sorts, where some of our legacy carrier competitors basically paid their most senior pilots to retire early. That in fact caused a pilot shortage in the industry, and then they turned around and went after and hired all of our pilots, a lot of our pilots, I should say. And these are pilots that are professionals, and they do a great job, and they do a phenomenal job every day. But when they're being offered a lot more money to go work for somebody else, then they go move to that. And it's not that they're offered a lot more money straight away. It's that they get poached, so to speak, with these statements that are very public today about some CEOs have said how they're gunning for us. They're trying to put us out of business. They just can't wait for that to happen. Look, it's a competitive industry, and we all know that. We joined this industry because it's competitive, and we're competitive by nature. But some of the rules of the game have really changed, especially coming out of COVID, and it's made it very difficult to compete. You've heard today, and there's been testimony on this, and in other public hearings as well, about how other airlines they really like the model that we've created, but they've also created rules and barriers around how they get to control the game, and the rules can change whenever they want them. And we're trying to play the game, and we do our best to play the game. And it's been difficult at times, and certainly in the last couple of years, it's been very difficult. If I may add one more thing, is we were in a merger situation that was ultimately challenged by the Department of Justice, and then we lost that case. And that prevented us from really reacting and being able to do a lot of things for a couple of years. Now we're trying. We're trying to improve our guest experience. I appreciate today's hearing, and I appreciate all of the abilities to ask these questions, because transparency is critical. If the guest or the public doesn't have trust, then what do we have? So we do agree with transparency. We do agree with all of that, and we do agree with enhanced guest experience. Everything in this industry is about supply and demand. It's a very powerful driver of price. It is, in fact, the most powerful driver of price is supply and demand. If our supply is reduced or lessened, then prices go up, and that's the last thing that we want to see for the American public. We believe that having a vibrant, healthy, fair system is the best way to move forward, and that includes access to slots as well at very important airports.
You know, you mentioned the hub difficulty, and I think everybody in this room understands what you mean by that term and the difficulty of access. Essentially, when the gates are blocked and there are no takeoff or landing slots at those hubs, Atlanta, Chicago, some of the busiest and most popular airports, you are blocked from competing. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is fair to say. In terms of being able to have enough critical mass, having one gate or two gates allows for some access, but in order to have critical mass and truly be able to compete for the general public in those cities is very difficult if you don't have enough critical mass.
And I think there's been some mention about the use of frequent flyer programs and co-branded credit card agreements. That's another source of squelching competition, is it not?
The credit card programs, I believe, are successful in achieving the goals of what the airlines want, which is to create even more loyalty to those airlines. But it really starts with the dominance in certain cities. If there was more competition in those large cities, then those credit card programs would not be quite as effective, because then there'd be a lot more choice for the customers in those cities to choose who do they really want to fly with, or do they feel locked in to who they must fly with.
And the practical consequence to consumers is that, take fees. The major airlines have the power to march lockstep in a parallel way. Parallel pricing is a established antitrust term. On February 20th, 2024, American raised its domestic first check bag fee by $5. That's correct, Mr. Johnson, isn't it?
That's correct, Senator.
Then, Mr. Nocella, isn't it true that United raised its domestic first check bag by the same amount within days of America's announcement?
I believe it is true.
In fact, it raised it on February 23rd, just 3 days later. And then, Mr. Carter, Delta raised its domestic first check bag within 2 weeks of American and United increases, correct?
I believe that's correct.
So this is the reason why we've asked for the Department of Transportation, in the letter that we've made a part of the record today, to look into some of these practices, because this kind of anti-competitive conduct, or the symptoms and evidence of it, I think requires a deeper look. Let me ask, just for the record, Mr. Schroeder, will you commit to ending this bag bounty program, or I'll call it, in your terms, an incentive payment program? Will you commit to ending it?
Again, I wouldn't characterize it as a bounty program. It's not something I'm able to commit to. Again, we review all opportunities to make the customer experience better. We're in the business of attracting our customers back, as somebody who has a background in marketing and has gone through that, it's a lot cheaper to keep the customer you have than go get new ones. And so this is about creating a fair and equitable scenario for all of our customers. We will continue to review what's the best way to do that. But right now,
Well,
that's what we
the
have.
most important part of your answer just now is no. You won't commit to ending it. And the reason I'm asking is that, you know, there is a history here, which is that the practices and tactics that begin with Frontier or Spirit are then mimicked by the legacy airlines. You have been at the vanguard of low-cost airlines and the charging of fees to make up for the lower cost of the basic fares, and that kind of business model has been mimicked or followed by the legacy airlines. And so a tactic like this one is important, not just for Frontier, but for the industry in general. And that's why I'm going to ask every one of the witnesses here today, will you commit on behalf of your companies not to adopt this payment incentive program? We'll use your terms. Mr. Johnson.
Absolutely, Senator.
Mr. Carter.
Senator, it's not a business practice we would ever endorse.
Mr. Nocella.
We also agree it's also very inconsistent with our brand. We will not do it.
Let me point out that we've been talking about the consolidation within the industry that has enabled 4 airlines. Southwest is not here today because they don't charge these fees, or they haven't until now. There's some talk about their beginning to charge seat assignment fees, but that's the reason they weren't included in the investigation. But those 4 airlines control 70% of the market. And that's the reason, or that's the result of airline consolidation beginning in 2008. Delta merged with Northwest. United merged with Continental. Southwest acquired Air Trans. American merged with U.S. Airways. Alaska Airlines has acquired Virgin America. I opposed a number of these mergers and acquisitions. The Department of Justice went to court against the recent proposed merger of Spirit and JetBlue. But the horse was out of the barn by that point. And so I think that we have work to do in this area, and I hope the Department of Transportation will begin it. You've been very patient. I appreciate your being here today. We wanted your CEOs to be here, as you know, but I'm glad we had you here today and that we had this hearing. I hope that you will take back to your CEOs, I think, the message that is pretty clear here, which is there's a bipartisan demand for changes in the way you do business on these junk fees. You don't like to call them junk fees, but that's what they are. And I think the bipartisan tenor of today's hearing speaks very loudly to this point. I just want to close with a couple of questions on what we've referred to generally as algorithms or artificial intelligence, which again is a trend in the industry, which I think poses some dangers, notwithstanding your reassurances, Mr. Klein. I want to ask Mr. Carter, 2 weeks ago during Delta's Investor Day, the president of Delta Airlines gave a presentation about how the airline was planning to use AI to set, and I'm quoting, granular pricing, end quote, that was, quote, responsive to customer signals, end quote. The end result of AI-powered targeted pricing is that customers may soon confront a world where every person is charged a different price for every product every time they look at an airline's website. This optimization may work to Delta's benefit, but I can't imagine that most travelers would welcome it. It would be confusing, conflicting, inconsistent, and potentially anti-competitive. Is it fair if two customers searching for the same flight at exactly the same time are charged different prices?
Senator, let me tell you that I was at Investor Day and recall the comment, and our use of AI is incredibly small. We are just trying to understand AI's application. As you know, AI is talked about every day, everywhere, all the time, and we thought it was incumbent upon us to at least try and test. And I would say it's a lab. It's very isolated. It's a tiny percentage. It's 1%.
Well, it's tiny right now as we sit here at about noon on December 4th. It's tiny, but it could explode over the next 6 months. And I think that the question to you is whether it is fair for two customers going to your website at exactly the same time for the same flight, being charged different prices based on their zip code, their gender, their other characteristics.
Senator, I think you're making an assumption about what AI would be used for, when I can tell you that that's certainly not the conclusion that we have come to date. I think the way, again, these are the earliest stages, and this is just early learnings. We have so much to learn about AI. We all do, I think, as a country. But it's more about the right offer at the right time, as opposed to
Well, I'm asking you the question about
different
exactly the same time. And it may be an unfair question to Delta only because you're exceptional in not asking for that information before someone decides to buy a ticket from you. But I'm asking you the question, which I think is not just a hypothetical, it's very real, because that's the direction that the airlines are going, using AI to charge different fees and different fares, depending on the personal information they get from you before you even decide to buy that ticket.
I would say to you, Senator, because of our commitment to our customers and our desire to be the airline of choice by our customers, and the desire to have loyalty from our customers, I can't conceive of, we all don't know how AI will be used, but I can't conceive of Delta using AI the way you've described. But I have to emphasize, we're just learning. We don't really know what we don't even know about AI today.
Well, that's the frightening part of the direction that the airlines are going. Truly, the terrifying part from a consumer standpoint.
I can assure you that our focus is efficiency, and I can assure you that to the extent Delta uses AI, it's in a responsible manner, Senator.
Let me ask you, Mr. Johnson, during American's earnings call last month, American's CEO said that the airline will soon, quote, put an AI lens to everything we do. Everything we do, an AI lens. Now, as we know, in its worst form, AI could be used to determine which passengers are traveling for weddings, funerals, family emergencies. They have no choice but to take your airline, and they'll pay anything to be on that flight. Airlines could use these tools to exploit passengers' worst moments, or best, to pad their profits. Can you commit that American will never use AI to exploit passengers who are traveling for a family emergency or even a funeral? You will commit to it. Can you commit to never using this personal information to set different fares or fees for different passengers at the same time for the same flight?
Senator, it's fascinating that you bring this up because it's such an important topic. It's pretty easy to immediately think about the issues with AI, the things that can go wrong, the things that won't be consumer friendly. But AI is potentially a fabulous computational and automation tool that can be used in many, many really extraordinary ways. For instance, our dabbling with AI in the early stages is focused on trying to run our operation better. We operate 6,000 flights using 1,700 aircraft 365 days of the year. It's a really, really complicated exercise and very automated. AI offers the opportunity for us to do that much better and in a way that's much better for our customers, particularly in terms of regular operations.
I am going to just say, with all due respect, you're not answering the question. I know you don't really have the authority, and maybe none of us has the knowledge right now to answer this question. But the fact that I'm assuming none of you can answer this question, I invite others to say that your airlines will never use AI to charge different fees or fares to people at the same time for the same flight. Any of you want to commit? None of you. Is truly one reason that we need to continue the kind of oversight that we're seeing here today, because AI opens the potential for practices that may be deeply unfair in resulting in discrimination based on these factors that you now collect information on routinely. And I know, Mr. Klein, you may be dubious about the use of algorithms for this purpose. Algorithms can be defined in a lot of different ways. AI has been used for 10 years in various settings, and we're just discovering the vast potential for using it. But the setting of fees and fares by airlines, again, as a potential paradigm for other industries, is deeply disconcerting when AI becomes a factor in the use of personal information, gender, age, residence, and so forth. So I'm going to conclude this hearing. I want to thank you again for being here. I don't need to repeat the messages that are contained in our report, and I think we're pretty dramatically and graphically restated here today. But I just don't think it can be business as usual for the airlines if you want to retain customer trust and credibility. So thank you for being here. With that, this hearing is adjourned. We'll keep the record open for 2 weeks in the event that any of you want to supplement your answers or any of my colleagues want to ask additional questions for the record. Thank you so much. Hearing's adjourned.